today is from Psalms 65, verses 1 through 4, from the Lamsa translation of the Bible. Praise is befitting thee, O God, in Zion, and unto thee shall the vow be performed. O hear my prayer, unto thee shall all flesh come. The words of the wicked have prevailed against me. As for our transgressions, thou shalt purge them. Blessed is the man in whom thou art pleased, he whom thou causest to approach unto thee, that he may dwell in thy courts, and be satisfied with the goodness of thy house, even of thy holy temple. As divine metaphysicians, we may understand this scripture on a different level, a metaphorical one that speaks to our higher self. God is our eternal source, and Zion is our spiritual consciousness, unto which we promise our soul or higher self. But what does this mean? Our spiritual consciousness is that state of mind in which we enter the holiest of holies and experience the peace which passeth understanding, or a state of being wherein we can release our worldly cares and feel the presence of something much bigger than us that is comforting and loving and unifying on all levels. Those of you who meditate regularly probably know what I'm talking about. When we are able to still the mind and body and let go of tensions, ruminations, and worries, and just sit in the quietude of our existence, watching our thoughts float by without judgment or attachment, then we have dwelt in that special in-between place where we are neither in the earthly world nor fully in the realm of spirit. We have a foot in both worlds, so to speak, and this is a very healing state to be in, no matter how short of a time we spend there. In this in-between state of consciousness, there is peace, a love bigger than any earthly relationship we can conceive or experience, and a sense of belonging that is as comforting as a heartfelt hug and as eternal as the universe itself. Settling into a good meditation is like lying on a fluffy bed and hovering in that twilight state of consciousness that happens just before we drop off to sleep. We are relaxed and we know we can let go because we are in good hands. Where scripture says, unto thee shall all flesh come, we understand this to refer to our voluntary decision to pursue our relationship with Source. On planet Earth, we have free will, and this leads us to a plethora of literal and metaphorical forks in the road where we get to choose our own adventures, just like those old books I used to read as a kid, where I flip around to find the different endings. You know, at some point in life, we begin to realize that nothing forced will bear fruit. And this also applies to our spiritual development. We can read scripture and see the words, but we may not be inspired by it or find meaning in it if we're not open to this even being possible for us. It's like the old adage about leading a horse to water. You can bring the horse to the water source, but you cannot make it drink. The same is true of God. We can go through motions, but if our heart and mind are not open and receptive to receive spiritual inspiration, or if we don't earnestly intend to further our spiritual growth, it's not important to us, we don't feel it necessary, then the magic won't happen. Like Nike, we have to just do it. Scripture then says, the words of the wicked have prevailed against me. In other words, I have let the things of the world dictate my worth, rather than rely upon my spiritual understanding of my life and experiences. As one example, when we associate our identity solely with our function in society, what we do, instead of with our motivation for why we feel fulfilled doing this function, we may not completely acknowledge and honor that I am within us, that divine eternal seed that links us forever to our spiritual source. So for an example here, it's one thing to become a doctor because society says it's a profession that's got good prospects, it's good income, you have potential for advancement. Society's measure says this is good to do. But isn't it yet another thing entirely to be drawn magnetically to the medical profession because we understand that part of our soul contract in this lifetime is to learn and practice healing for ourselves and for others, because we recognize that we are a conduit of divine light and love. Ooh, whoa, can you feel the difference? I can. And which doctor would you prefer to be treated by? We can consider what other ways in which we might allow the world to dictate our worth. So we move on in the scripture, and it says, as for our transgressions, thou shalt purge them. The very act of willfully pursuing a relationship with the divine kind of automatically paves the way. It cleanses away our reliance on ego for acceptance and reorients our spiritual compass toward our true north. We're not looking outside anymore of ourselves. We come to rely less upon the world and other people to define who and what we are, and we turn inward to ask for that guidance from our higher self and God. When we connect in meditation with that peace that passeth understanding, we begin to crave it for our soul's sake. And our attachment to things of the outer world slowly and gradually begins to slough away here and there, kind of like a snake shedding its skin, but more gradually. With repeated intentional meditation, where we ask ourselves to relax, we visualize connecting with Source, and then we just listen to what comes. When we do this and get in this habit over and over again, it sets this energy cycle in motion, and we start to undergo a natural process that refines our perspective about what is important in our life and what we're willing to tolerate within our sphere of influence. Because these things may or may not be reflective of our authentic essence and purpose, which might change over time, where our understanding of ourselves, our self-awareness also evolves. In time, anything non-authentic that doesn't resonate with us falls away over time. Those individuals who resonate with us right here, right now, at this particular stage of our spiritual evolution, will have an affinity for interacting with us, and vice versa. We draw these individuals unto ourselves so that we can learn soul lessons that we need right here and right now. We create our world through the natural laws of vibration and attraction, and we've talked about this before. And when we've learned the lessons we need to learn from certain people, these individuals may simply recede from our sphere of influence. This is the natural law of karma. Once we learn a soul lesson completely, whether it be on our own or through the interactions with others, we do not need to repeat it. Similarly, we would be wise to bless everything that leaves our lives and have an attitude of gratitude about the lessons that we learned while these things and people were in our sphere of influence. Now, this is a tricky thing to say because attachment in general is a huge challenge for us, including attachment to expected outcomes. And practicing non-attachment is kind of easier said than done because we are still human. We're still in these human bodies that have some very strong human emotions that go on. But even in this difficulty, isn't there so much learning for us? Scripture finally says, blessed is the man in whom thou art pleased, he whom thou causest to approach unto thee, that he may dwell in thy courts and be satisfied with the goodness of thy house, even of thy holy temple. Blessed are we who choose to seek out our spiritual source and understand our eternal nature. We know that in God's house are many mansions, and we understand as metaphysicians that these mansions represent various states of consciousness during our soul's evolution. And how large can a mansion be? It can be infinitely huge. When we dwell in the house of God, we journey within, into the realm of our soul, free from worldly concerns, and we find respite in that sanctuary that has been prepared for us and waiting for us all along. We are free to engage in the sacred union of our soul with its eternal source, and this brings us bliss. We are satisfied with finding our source, and we are glad to be the temple that houses the great I Am. We carry this cosmic seed of our divine origins within us. We are the temple. So let us worship God by visiting that special place as often as we are able, by sitting peacefully, breathing slowly and deliberately, and allowing ourselves to let go into that silence of meditation. Meditation is that doorway that we open in our consciousness to allow ourselves to connect more fully with the divine. It's always there. We're always contained within it, but we're not conscious of our connection until we put our mind on that. We may dedicate ourselves to spending time in meditation to affirm and connect with Source, even in the midst of the chaos of our lives. And Reverend Jackson has said before, and I used to think it was impossible, you should be able to meditate in the middle of a noisy football stadium. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I don't know if I'm up to that challenge, but there's been some days around the house with my 11-year-old where I had to make some meditation happen. So you learn, even in the midst of this chaos, taking these moments of meditation is so good for us on so many levels. Even a few short minutes can help us reset our outlook, energize us physically, and help us retrieve our optimism, which is so important for our mental health right now. Our mind and ego sometimes distract us from putting our mind on Source by telling us how important the things of the world are. And frankly, they are important. They do impact us. They impact us physically. They affect us emotionally. But we can always return to this calm, peaceful, spiritual constant in our lives by remembering in any single moment that we are part of that great eternal all that is God. We can tune in to God's energetic vibration by putting our mind on God, even for just a tiny little while. And meditation doesn't have to take up much time at all. People have already spoken about this, but I'll tell you what, as a parent, meditation can be as quick as the time between phone calls. You're at the office, you have to go from one thing to another. You can take a moment, close your eyes, and just breathe. A bathroom break. And parents, I know you feel me on this, because there's times where you just need a moment, and maybe that little closet door is what it needs for you to just take a moment and breathe. A momentary gaze out the window, looking at your garden. Repetitive tasks are very nice this way, because when you're washing dishes, walking the dog, running, doing laundry, painting, knitting, you get this cycle going, you have a rhythm going. And sometimes these types of chores or hobbies or rhythmic actions can be a gateway through which we can start training our brain to let go of the ruminations and allow for some sacred space in our ever so busy lives. You've heard that saying, chop wood, carry water. You got to do the things of the world. You have to attend to things that need attended to. But you can use it to your advantage, because when we're completely consumed by that rhythmic routine process, we can slip into a sacred space where our mind and body slow down. You don't have to sit in an elaborate temple or adorn our altar with beautiful things in order to access the holiest of holies that lies within us, ready to receive us at any hour, day or night. Like Motel 6, our inner I am always leaves the light on for us. When we create little rituals for ourselves, it helps us open a door in our consciousness and purposefully step through it into the stillness and peace. And by doing this, we acknowledge the God within us. So, we can mindfully sip our tea, noting the fragrant steam that rises from the cup, feeling the warmth in our hands, savoring each sip we take, expressing heartfelt gratitude for this moment with this cup of tea. It can be anything so little as that. For me, I have a day dedicated in my week where I sit in meditation for an hour or more with a small group of like-minded women, and we cherish this moment together. We take time, we go deep into the silence, and we nourish our collective spirit. We sit in this quietude, we get inspiration and insight from Source, we ask questions, and then we listen. And I can't tell you, I'm not sure what I would do if I didn't have this sacred space set aside in which I can let go and let God. It's done a lot of good for me on so many levels of my being, including helping with anxiety and frustrations, which have been about 100-fold higher for me lately. Maybe you too. So when we spend time in meditative communion with our source, even in a small way, all is well at the highest level of our being. Even though there's chaos and uncertainty in the midst of our earthly existence, and there sure is a lot of this out there right now in the world, even in spite of that, the eternal portion of our being is forever anchored in the safe harbor of our inner I am. We are an individuated spiritual consciousness that is interconnected with all other consciousnesses. And together, we are all encompassed within the allness of God. Sometimes we get distracted from this truth, but the reality is we are always connected to one another and to God. We are never alone. And because we are energy, fundamentally, we cannot and will not cease to exist. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it just changes form. These are fundamental truths that we can take comfort in. Keeping ourselves conscious of these things is important on an intellectual level. It connects us mentally. But working to build our relationship with God starts with us just being like Nike, just doing it. We can resolve to make that time to meet God in our holy temple inside ourselves by opening an intentional meditative door into stillness and peace through any repetitive activity we choose, or simply by sitting in silence. And we dwell in thy courts and are satisfied with the goodness of thy house. Each and every moment we choose to put our mind on source helps bring us closer to God. It reminds us of that anchor we have into the stillness within us. Let's resolve to set aside a mindful moment or more when we are able to visit our inner temple and commune with the I am within. Let meditation be the manna that feeds our soul. We need it right now. And so it is.